My sister texted, "We're in Paris. Nobody cares about your graduation dinner." Then my cousin added, "Oh, and your $28,000 savings paid for our tickets. Thanks." I stood alone in the empty banquet hall I had paid for. I whispered, "Good." That night, I shut down their travel cards, froze my sister's tuition plan, and cut off every payment they relied on. Then I went after something even bigger. Imagine this. You're standing in a lavish country club banquet hall, white tablecloths draped over 24 empty chairs. Untouched shrimp cocktails are growing warm under crystal chandeliers that cost a small fortune. Your phone buzzes, and it's a text from your sister, Jessica, in Paris. "We're in Paris. Nobody cares about your graduation dinner." Then, my cousin Brandon chimes in. "Oh, and your $28,000 savings? Yeah, that covered our tickets. Thanks." My stomach dropped, my hands shaking as I stared at those messages. Then at the empty room that had cost me $3,000 to reserve. The silence echoed off those marble walls, heavy with humiliation and betrayal. And that's when I whispered one word that would change absolutely everything. Good. It was 7:30 p.m., the country club's grandfather clock chiming loudly, and I was still the only soul in that magnificent room. Crystal glasses caught the light, creating tiny rainbows on the pristine white tablecloths, the ones I'd personally picked out just weeks ago, so excited. Each place setting represented someone I truly believed cared about my achievement, someone I thought would celebrate me finally finishing my MBA from Northwestern University. Just 3 months earlier, I was the family's golden boy. I was juggling a part-time job at Henderson Properties, our family business, and maintaining a perfect 4.0 GPA. My father, Robert, couldn't introduce me without beaming. "This is my son, the future of our business." Meanwhile, my younger sister, Jessica, and our cousin Brandon seemed perfectly content living in my shadow. And honestly, I didn't mind being the responsible one. I actually embraced it. Henderson Properties wasn't just any company. My grandfather built it from absolutely nothing back in 1972, transforming it into a commercial real estate empire worth millions. My dad took the reins in 2005, and everyone, including me, just assumed I was next in line. For 2 years, I had scrimped and saved every single penny from my part-time salary and those grueling weekend consulting gigs. I was building a nest egg, a substantial sum, to buy into the family partnership right after graduation. This was my future, my destiny. Jessica, on the other hand, was studying art history at Peton College, a private institution with a jaw-dropping $60,000 annual tuition. Her parents covered every single expense, no questions asked. She lived in a luxury apartment near campus, drove a BMW my dad bought her last Christmas, and spent her summers globe-trotting through Europe on what she called cultural education trips. And Brandon? Oh, Brandon. He dropped out of community college after 1 semester and just moved into the guest house behind our family's sprawling estate in Lake Forest. He always claimed he was an entrepreneur, constantly pitching new business ventures that, conveniently, always required a substantial upfront investment. Last year, it was a fusion taco food truck. The year before that, a cryptocurrency exchange. Both ventures, unsurprisingly, vanished along with all the money our family poured into them. So, 2 weeks ago, when I tentatively mentioned wanting to celebrate my graduation properly, my father's eyes lit up. "Absolutely, son. This is a major milestone. Invite everyone important. Make it memorable." He even suggested I invite his business partners, potential clients, the entire extended family. "Think of it," he'd said, "as your official introduction to the professional world." I spent hours, literally hours, crafting the perfect guest list, designing elegant invitations, and selecting a menu that I thought would impress my father's colleagues. The Riverside Country Club, where I stood now, represented everything I was working toward: tradition, success, belonging to something bigger than myself. I wanted this dinner to mark my transition from student to partner, from son to equal. My girlfriend, Sarah, seemed genuinely excited about the event too. We'd been dating for 8 months, and I was so looking forward to introducing her to my entire extended family for the first time. She even bought a new dress specifically for the occasion, something elegant in navy blue that perfectly complemented her blonde hair. But as I sat there, surrounded by those empty chairs and all that untouched food, my hands started to shake as I reached for my wallet. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong, beyond just the abandonment. My leather wallet, usually thick with cards and cash, felt unnaturally thin. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, a growing dread creeping into my gut. My savings account, which had shown a healthy $28,600 last week, now displayed a terrifying balance of $412. But that wasn't even the worst part. As I scrolled through the recent transactions, my stomach literally dropped. Small withdrawals, over and over. $200 here, $500 there, always just under the amounts that would trigger any fraud alerts. The Paris trip wasn't just some spontaneous, cruel betrayal. No, this was systematic theft. It had been happening right under my nose for months. I set my phone down, my hands still trembling, staring at the elaborate spread of food that would now go to waste, just like my trust in the people I loved most. I dialed the fraud hotline for First National Bank, still shaking, sitting alone among those elegant table settings. The automated system routed me through endless menus before finally connecting me to Linda, a customer service representative who, thankfully, sounded genuinely concerned when I explained my nightmare. "Mr. Henderson, I'm looking at your account history now," Linda said after I provided my identification. "I can see why you're confused. Let me trace these transactions for you." The next few minutes absolutely shattered every single assumption I had about my family's honesty. Linda explained that my sister, Jessica, was added as an authorized user on my savings account when I turned 18, supposedly for emergency purposes. According to the bank's records, my father, Robert, had set up this arrangement to help me learn financial responsibility by having family oversight. The withdrawals began small. Linda continued, her voice gentle. $50 in January, then gradually increased. Most stayed under $500, which explains why you didn't receive notifications. Your sister has been making these withdrawals consistently for 18 months. 18 months. While I worked double shifts at the family business, while I studied late into the night, while I saved every single dollar for my future partnership, Jessica was quietly, systematically, draining my accounts to fund her extravagant lifestyle. That food truck Brandon claimed he was financing with his own savings? That cryptocurrency venture that needed a $10,000 investment? All of it funded with my money. "There's another concern," Linda added, her voice hesitant now. "I'm seeing credit card charges linked to your account from someone named Brandon Henderson. These appear to be international transactions from the past week, totaling approximately $15,000. My cousin hadn't just stolen money for a European vacation. He'd been using a credit card somehow connected to my financial accounts, running up charges I'd be responsible for. The Paris trip that Jessica and Brandon claimed cost $28,000. It actually totaled over $43,000 when you included Brandon's separate credit card spending." I thanked Linda, hung up the phone, and just sat there in my car in the country club parking lot, trying to process the sheer magnitude of this betrayal. My family didn't just abandon my graduation dinner on a whim. They had planned this theft carefully, meticulously, using my own money to fund their escape, while leaving me alone with the bills and the absolute humiliation. I drove straight to Henderson Properties, needing answers from my father, needing them now. The building sat dark against the evening sky, but I had a key, and I knew the security code. Inside my father's office, I flipped on the lights and immediately noticed financial documents scattered across his mahogany desk. This was highly unusual for someone who typically kept everything filed so precisely. And the papers? Oh, the papers. They told a story I never, ever suspected. Henderson Properties was drowning in debt. Deep, suffocating debt. The last 3 major deals had fallen through, leaving the company with massive obligations and absolutely no revenue to cover them. Construction loans were in default. Client payments were months overdue. The business I thought I'd be joining as a partner was actually a failing enterprise, being kept afloat through increasingly desperate, unethical measures. But the worst discovery sat in a manila folder labeled Trust Fund Management. My grandfather, a brilliant man, had established a substantial trust specifically for my education and future partnership in the business. According to these documents, my father had been using that money, my money, to cover Henderson Properties' operating expenses for the past 2 years. The account that should have contained over $200,000 now showed a terrifying balance of $37,000. Then I found printed emails between my father and Jessica, discussing how to manage Mac's expectations about joining the partnership. One email from Jessica, dated just 3 weeks ago, read, "He's getting suspicious about the money. Maybe we should let him buy in for a small percentage, just enough to feel important while we figure out how to fix the bigger problems." My father's response: "Absolutely not. If he discovers the trust fund situation, he'll have legal grounds to audit the entire business. We need him focused on school until we can stabilize things. The Paris trip will buy us time. They never intended to let me become a real partner. They needed my money to keep their failing business alive while keeping me completely ignorant of the true situation. My years of hard work, my careful savings, my dreams of building something meaningful with my family. None of it was ever part of their plan." My phone buzzed. It was a text from my girlfriend, Sarah. "Sorry, I couldn't make dinner tonight. Jessica called and said you canceled because of a family emergency in Europe. Hope everything's okay with Brandon and Jessica. Call me when you get back." The lies, the utter deception, extended even to Sarah. My sister had called her directly to ensure she wouldn't show up at the dinner, ensuring my humiliation was complete. Not only did they steal my money and abandon my celebration, but they actively deceived my girlfriend to guarantee I'd be sitting alone in that banquet hall. I locked up the office and drove home through the quiet streets of Lake Forest, passing houses where families probably sat down for honest dinners together, where children didn't steal from their siblings and parents didn't embezzle from trust funds. The family estate, usually a comforting sight, looked peaceful in the moonlight, its manicured lawns and Georgian architecture suggesting a stability and tradition that, I now knew, existed only on the surface. I sat in my Jeep Cherokee outside Henderson Properties for nearly an hour, just staring at the building that represented 3 generations of my family's work. The weight of what I'd discovered pressed against my chest like a physical force. My father wasn't just a bad businessman making poor decisions. He was a criminal, systematically stealing from client accounts and family trusts. My sister and cousin weren't just selfish and thoughtless. They were accomplices in a conspiracy that could destroy lives. My phone showed 11:47 p.m. when I finally dialed the credit card company's 24-hour fraud line. The customer service representative, a patient woman named Carol, walked me through the process of reporting the cards used by Jessica and Brandon as stolen. Within minutes, those cards were deactivated, leaving them stranded in Paris with no access to my money. Next, I called the bank and removed Jessica as an authorized user on all my accounts. The process required additional verification since she'd been on the accounts for so long, but Linda from earlier had flagged my case as high priority. Every automatic payment I'd been covering for my family, canceled. Jessica's tuition payments, Brandon's car loan, the insurance on his vehicle, and the monthly allowance I'd been providing for their expenses. All gone. But these immediate actions felt utterly insufficient given the sheer scope of their betrayal. I needed legal advice, and I knew exactly who to call. William Hartwell. He handled my grandfather's estate planning and still served as the family attorney for trust-related matters. Despite the late hour, I dialed his emergency number. "Mac?" William's voice sounded concerned but alert. "What's happened?" I explained everything I'd discovered, from the stolen savings to the failing business, to the depleted trust fund. William listened without interruption, occasionally asking for specific details about dates and amounts. When I finished, he was quiet for several long moments. "Your grandfather suspected this might happen," William finally said, his voice low. "He was brilliant, but not naive. He built protection into your trust that your father doesn't know about." According to William, my grandfather included clauses that allowed me to trigger an immediate forensic audit of Henderson Properties if I suspected financial misconduct. The trust also gave me the right to freeze all family financial accounts pending the results of that audit. And most importantly, the kicker? I actually owned 35% of Henderson Properties through inheritance provisions my grandfather had kept completely confidential. My father had been operating under the assumption that he controlled the company entirely. "There's more," William continued, a hint of something like satisfaction in his tone. "Your grandfather established a separate account with emergency funds specifically for situations like this. He wrote a letter explaining his concerns about Robert's character and his absolute confidence in your integrity. If you want to take control of this situation, Mac, You have the legal authority and the financial resources to do it. By 2 a.m., I had signed papers, authorizing the audit, freezing family accounts, and activating the protective measures my grandfather had built into the trust. William assured me the process would move quickly, especially since we had documentation of the stolen funds and clear evidence of business mismanagement. I drove home feeling a strange mixture of exhaustion and cold determination. The house sat dark and empty, my parents presumably sleeping peacefully, while their children committed crimes in Europe. For the first time in my life, I was grateful for the silence. I needed time to plan my next moves, away from their manipulation and lies. My phone rang at 6 a.m., jolting me awake from a restless sleep. Jessica's name appeared on the screen, and I answered to hear her screaming hysterically. "Mac, what did you do?" she shrieked. "Our hotel payment was declined, and they're holding our passports until we settle the bill. Brandon's credit card was rejected at breakfast, and now we're stuck in the lobby with security guards watching us." I listened to her panic, without feeling the slightest bit of sympathy. "You stole $43,000 from me, Jessica. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences?" "It wasn't stealing. It was family money, and we needed a break after everything we've been through," she cried. "What exactly have you been through?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Free college education, free housing, free car, free everything, while I worked and saved for years." She hung up. But within minutes, Brandon called from what sounded like a busy police station. His usual confident swagger had been replaced by genuine fear. "Dude, they repossessed my car during a traffic stop," he said, sounding utterly shell-shocked. "The loan company said the payment stopped and they had a court order. I'm at the police station trying to figure out how to get home, but my wallet's in the car, and I don't have money for a cab." I explained the same thing to Brandon that I'd told Jessica. Actions have consequences, and their actions were theft. But before I could hang up, my father's number appeared on the screen. "Mac, we need to talk." Robert's voice sounded strangely calm, almost relieved. "I'm at the office. Can you come in?" When I arrived at Henderson Properties, I found my father sitting in his office, his head in his hands, surrounded by the very same financial documents I'd seen the night before. He looked up when I entered, and I was startled to see tears in his eyes. "I'm glad you found out," he said quietly. "I've been drowning for 2 years, and I didn't know how to tell you." The conversation that followed utterly destroyed my remaining assumptions about my family. Robert admitted that Henderson Properties owed $800,000 to clients whose money was supposed to be held in escrow for property purchases. He'd been using newer clients' deposits to pay older clients, creating a classic Ponzi scheme that got more desperate with each passing month. "The Paris trip was Jessica's idea," he explained. "She said if we could keep you distracted for another few weeks, she'd help us figure out a solution. Your mother knows everything, Mac. She's been helping me move money between accounts to buy time." My mother, Patricia, who had taught me about honesty and integrity, who made me promise never to lie or cheat, had been forging client signatures and falsifying documents to cover up their crimes. The woman I trusted more than anyone in the world had been actively planning to frame me for their theft. "We were going to blame you for the missing money," Robert continued, his voice barely a whisper. "Make it look like you had a gambling problem or drug addiction. Jessica had documentation ready to support the story. We thought if we could make you the scapegoat, the rest of us could start over somewhere else." I stared at my father, this man I'd spent 24 years trying to impress, and realized I didn't know him at all. The successful businessman was an illusion. The loving father was a performance. The family legacy was built on lies that started long before I was old enough to understand. But as we sat in his office, discussing the full extent of their betrayal, my phone rang with Jessica's number. This time, she wasn't screaming about declined credit cards. She was whispering frantically, and I could hear genuine terror in her voice. "Mac, someone's following us," she said. "These men approached Brandon at a cafe and said they know about Henderson Properties. They want to meet about business opportunities, but something feels wrong. They know details about our family that strangers shouldn't know." That's when it hit me. Our family's crimes had attracted attention from dangerous people, people who might not be interested in legal remedies. Jessica and Brandon might be facing consequences far worse than frozen credit cards and repossessed cars. My father's office suddenly felt like a war room as I processed Jessica's terrified phone call. The men following them in Paris weren't random criminals. They knew specific details about Henderson Properties, which meant our family's financial crimes had attracted the attention of organized criminals who viewed the missing escrow funds as a very personal business debt. "Who are the clients whose money you stole?" I asked Robert, my voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. My father's face went pale as he shuffled through the client files on his desk. "Most of them are local businesses and private investors, but there's one account that's been particularly problematic." He pulled out a thick folder labeled Meridian Holdings, LLC. Meridian Holdings had invested $400,000 through Henderson Properties for a commercial real estate deal that simply never materialized. According to the file, Meridian was owned by Viktor Koff, a Russian immigrant who had made his fortune in import-export businesses. The file contained newspaper clippings suggesting Koff's businesses operated in legal gray areas, with suspected connections to money laundering operations. "How long has their money been missing?" I asked. "Oh, 14 months, Robert admitted. Kossov's representatives have been increasingly aggressive about demanding updates on their investment. Last month, they threatened to involve their own investigators if we didn't provide immediate results." I called William Hartwell and explained the new, terrifying complication. Within an hour, he was in the office with us, along with a private investigator named Thomas Reed, who specialized in international financial crimes. Reed explained that criminal organizations often used legitimate investments to launder money, then became extremely violent when those investments disappeared. "If Koslov's people are tracking your family in Paris, they view this as a $400,000 debt that needs to be collected one way or another," he stated grimly. "Despite everything Jessica and Brandon had done to me, I simply couldn't let them face physical danger because of my father's crimes. But I also refused to simply hand over money to criminals without getting something substantial in return. I'll help them," I told Robert and William. "But the family needs to understand that everything changes after this. No more lies, no more theft, no more treating me like a fool who exists to solve problems I didn't create." I wired $25,000 to a trusted contact in Paris, a former college roommate named David, who worked for an international consulting firm. David agreed to help Jessica and Brandon get safely out of France and back to the United States. But the money came with conditions. They had to follow David's instructions exactly. They couldn't contact any family members until they were back on American soil, and they must return home immediately without any additional European travel. While coordinating their rescue, I was also working with William to implement my takeover of Henderson Properties. The forensic audit confirmed the full, horrifying extent of my father's mismanagement. $800,000 in missing client funds, $300,000 in unpaid business loans, and $200,000 stolen from my trust fund. The business was technically insolvent, dead in the water. But thankfully, my grandfather's hidden assets provided enough capital to cover the debts if managed properly. William presented my father with legal documents that transferred controlling ownership of Henderson Properties to me, along with full authority over all family financial accounts. Robert could remain as an employee with a reduced salary, but he would have no decision-making power and would be subject to strict oversight for all business activities. "You also need to understand that your wife and children will be held accountable for their roles in this conspiracy," William explained, his voice firm. "Mac is being extraordinarily generous by not pressing criminal charges, but that generosity depends on complete cooperation with the recovery process." 3 days later, Jessica and Brandon returned from Paris, chastened and humbled by their terrifying experience. Jessica's usual defiant attitude had been replaced by genuine remorse, while Brandon seemed to finally understand that actions truly have consequences. They were both required to attend financial counseling sessions and submit to monthly account reviews to prevent any future theft. But the most significant change came from an unexpected source. Thomas Reed's investigation into Meridian Holdings revealed that Viktor Koff wasn't just a criminal trying to recover stolen money. He was actually an undercover federal agent working on a long-term investigation into international money laundering operations. The missing $400,000 represented evidence in a federal case, not a debt to organized crime. "Your father's theft inadvertently compromised an ongoing FBI investigation," Reed explained. "But your cooperation in recovering the funds and providing documentation could help the Bureau complete their case against the real criminals. Agent Koff met with us the following week, explaining that his investment in Henderson Properties was designed to track how criminal money moved through legitimate real estate transactions. My father's theft actually created an opportunity for the FBI to trace additional criminal activities they wouldn't have discovered otherwise. We're prepared to overlook the misappropriation of our investigative funds in exchange for your family's full cooperation with our investigation, Agent Koff explained. Your business records and client files could help us identify other money laundering operations throughout the Chicago area. Working with the FBI suddenly gave Henderson Properties credibility and protection while we rebuilt the business legally. Agent Koss even recommended us to legitimate investors who were impressed by our willingness to cooperate with federal authorities and implement strict financial oversight. 6 months after that humiliating graduation dinner, Henderson Properties was operating with complete transparency, serving legitimate clients, and building a reputation for ethical business practices. My father worked as a senior sales associate under my supervision, earning back trust through consistent, honest behavior. My mother handled administrative tasks while attending therapy to address the psychological factors that led her to participate in financial crimes. Jessica had transferred from expensive Peton College to Northwestern University, where she was studying business administration while working part-time at Henderson Properties to repay her debt to me. Brandon completed an electrician training program I arranged and was starting his own legitimate contracting business with proper licensing and insurance. The transformation hasn't been easy, not by a long shot, but it's been honest. For the first time in years, our family dinners included actual conversations instead of manipulation and lies. We were building relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. The morning after Jessica and Brandon's safe return from Paris, I was reviewing financial statements in my new office when my phone rang with an international number. My stomach tightened, expecting more complications from their European misadventure. Mac Henderson, a voice with a slight Eastern European accent, said, professional but somehow menacing. This is Mac. Who am I speaking with? My name is Victor Koslov, the voice continued. I believe we have mutual interests regarding your family's business affairs. I signaled for Thomas Reed, who had been helping coordinate security measures, and activated the call recording feature on my phone. Reed nodded approvingly as I continued the conversation. Mr. Koslov, I understand you're a client of Henderson Properties. I'd be happy to discuss your account. Your family has been very creative with my investment, Mr. Henderson. Koslov's voice remained calm, but there was an underlying threat that made my hand shake slightly. I was talking to someone who tracked down stolen money for a living, and my family had made themselves targets through their criminal behavior. $400,000 was entrusted to your father for a specific real estate venture. That money has been missing for 14 months. I'm aware of the situation with your account. I responded carefully. I've recently assumed control of the business, and I'm working to resolve all outstanding client obligations. Would you be available to meet and discuss a resolution? Very responsible of you, young man. However, I should mention that your sister and cousin were quite chatty during their recent European vacation. They shared interesting details about your family's financial empire with some associates of mine in Paris. My blood ran cold. Jessica and Brandon didn't just steal money for a vacation. They compromised our family's security by bragging to strangers about our business, potentially exposing us to criminals who now viewed Henderson Properties as a target for further exploitation. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Koslov? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. A meeting tomorrow, 2 o'clock at your office. Come alone and bring documentation showing how you intend to restore my investment. We can discuss whether your family's debts require additional forms of repayment. After hanging up, Thomas Reed immediately began making calls to his contacts in federal law enforcement. Within 2 hours, we were sitting in a secure FBI conference room with Agent Sarah Morrison, who headed the Bureau's Financial Crimes Division. Victor Koff is indeed an international criminal with suspected ties to Russian money laundering operations, Agent Morrison explained. But he's also been cooperating with our investigation into organized crime activities in the Chicago area. The $400,000 your father stole represents evidence in an ongoing federal case. The complexity of our situation became horrifyingly clear. Koff was simultaneously a criminal, a federal informant, and a legitimate victim of my father's theft. The FBI needed our cooperation to complete their investigation, but they couldn't openly protect us without compromising Kossov's undercover status. Your family inadvertently became involved in a federal investigation, Agent Morrison continued. The good news is that your willingness to cooperate and make restitution demonstrates that. You're not career criminals. The bad news is that Kossov's criminal associates view your father's theft as a sign of disrespect that requires consequences. Agent Morrison proposed a solution that protected our family while advancing the FBI investigation. I would meet with Koff as scheduled, but federal agents would be monitoring the conversation from nearby locations. The goal was to determine whether Koff intended to collect the debt legitimately or if he was planning to use our family's vulnerability for additional criminal activities. If Koff makes any threats or demands beyond simple financial restitution, we'll have grounds to arrest him and his associates, Agent Morrison explained. But you need to understand the risks. These are dangerous people who don't hesitate to use violence when they feel disrespected. I spent the evening preparing for the meeting while implementing additional security measures for my family. Jessica and Brandon were staying at a hotel under assumed names until the situation resolved. My parents had temporary protection from private security guards Thomas Reed arranged through his network of former law enforcement personnel. The next afternoon, Victor Koff arrived at Henderson Properties precisely at 2 o'clock, accompanied by two large men who positioned themselves near the exits while we talked in my office. Koff himself was smaller than I expected, perhaps 55 years old, with graying hair and expensive clothing that suggested legitimate business success. You've made impressive changes to your father's business, Koff observed, reviewing the financial statements I prepared. The forensic audit shows real commitment to transparency. Most criminals simply disappear when their schemes collapse. I'm not a criminal, Mr. Koff, I stated, my voice firm. I'm trying to fix problems I didn't create while building an honest business. Koff studied me carefully, then opened a briefcase containing documents that surprised me completely. Instead of demands for immediate payment, he presented incorporation papers for a new company called Meridian Development LLC. I propose a partnership, Mr. Henderson. Your family's business has potential, but it lacks the international connections necessary for significant growth. My organization can provide capital and clients for legitimate real estate ventures with appropriate oversight to prevent future mismanagement. The offer was tempting, incredibly tempting, but also incredibly dangerous. Koff was essentially proposing to turn Henderson Properties into a front for money laundering operations disguised as legitimate business expansion. Accepting would solve our immediate financial problems while making us permanent criminals. I appreciate the offer, I responded, my heart pounding in my chest. But Henderson Properties is committed to operating within legal boundaries. I'd prefer to repay your original investment and maintain our independence. Koslov's expression didn't change, but his associates shifted slightly, hands moving toward what I assumed were concealed weapons. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as he considered my rejection of his proposal. Independence is expensive, Mr. Henderson. Your family's debt represents more than money. It represents disrespect, carelessness, and damage to my reputation among business associates who expect reliable performance. Before I could respond, Koslov's phone rang. He answered in rapid Russian, his voice becoming increasingly agitated. After hanging up, he turned back to me, with what might have been genuine concern in his eyes. There's been a development that affects our negotiation. My associates in Europe report that your sister and cousin were not the only Americans making unusual financial claims in Paris last week. Someone has been impersonating members of your family, attempting to access bank accounts and make large withdrawals using forged identification. The revelation added yet another terrifying layer of complexity to our situation. Our family wasn't just dealing with consequences from our own crimes. Someone else was using our identities for additional financial fraud, potentially connecting us to criminal activities we didn't commit. Who would have access to our personal information? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Koff's answer chilled me to the bone. Someone with inside knowledge of your family's financial situation and enough criminal connections to obtain professional forgeries. Someone who knows exactly how much money your family has stolen and from whom. As federal agents listening from outside prepared to intervene, I realized our family's financial crimes had attracted multiple layers of criminals who viewed us as both targets and opportunities. The graduation dinner that started this nightmare was just the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous situation. The FBI raid happened so fast that I barely had time to process what was occurring. Within seconds of Koff revealing the identity theft situation, federal agents stormed into my office through multiple entrances, weapons drawn and commands echoing off the walls. Koslov's associates surrendered immediately, hands raised, while Koslov himself sat calmly, almost as if he'd been expecting this moment. "Mr. Henderson, step away from the desk," Agent Morrison commanded, though her tone suggested I wasn't in danger. "Victor Koff, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering and attempted extortion." As the agents secured the scene, Koff caught my eye and nodded slightly. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said, as they placed handcuffs on his wrists. "You chose integrity over expedience." Only later did I learn that Koslov's arrest was planned from the beginning. The FBI needed evidence of his criminal activities, and our meeting provided the necessary documentation of his attempts to recruit legitimate businesses for money laundering operations. My refusal to accept his partnership offer gave federal prosecutors the clear criminal intent they needed for a successful prosecution. Agent Morrison explained that the identity theft situation was actually part of a larger investigation into organized crime activities targeting financially vulnerable families. "Your father's embezzlement made your family visible to criminals who specialize in exploiting desperate people," she explained. "They steal identities, empty remaining accounts, and disappear before victims realize what's happened." The criminals using our family's identities had already been arrested in Paris, thanks to cooperation between federal agencies and European law enforcement. Jessica and Brandon's loud bragging about our family's wealth had actually helped police track down the identity thieves who were monitoring American tourists for potential targets. With the immediate criminal threats resolved, I could finally focus on rebuilding Henderson properties and, just as importantly, our family relationships. I organized a meeting at the same Riverside Country Club banquet hall where this nightmare began. But this time, the gathering had a completely different purpose. 23 people attended the family meeting. Immediate family members, extended relatives who were disgusted by my father's behavior, key employees of Henderson Properties, and even the clients whose money was stolen. I had prepared a comprehensive presentation showing how we would restore stolen funds, implement new safeguards, and rebuild the business with complete transparency. 6 months ago, I stood in this room alone, humiliated by family members who had stolen my money to fund their own selfishness. I began, my voice clear and steady. "Tonight, we're here to discuss how we move forward as a family and a business built on honesty rather than deception." My father, Robert, stood and addressed the group first. His voice broke as he described the psychological pressures that led to his criminal behavior. "I convinced myself that borrowing from client accounts was temporary, that I could replace the money before anyone noticed. But borrowing became stealing, and temporary became permanent. Max saved our family from complete destruction by having the courage to face the truth." Patricia, my mother, spoke next about the shame of participating in financial fraud and document forgery. "I told myself I was protecting our family, but I was actually destroying the values we pretended to represent. My son showed more integrity in 1 week than I showed in 2 years of criminal activity." Jessica's transformation had been the most dramatic. The entitled college student who once stole thousands of dollars for European vacations now worked 30 hours per week at Henderson Properties while maintaining her grades at Northwestern University. "Mac could have let us face criminal charges or dangerous consequences in Paris," she told the group, her voice still a little shaky, but sincere. "Instead, he risked his own safety to protect us while demanding that we take responsibility for our choices." Brandon addressed his criminal behavior with genuine remorse I'd never seen from him before. "I spent years thinking I was entitled to other people's money because I had creative ideas that deserved funding. Mac taught me that creativity without integrity is just theft with extra steps." The clients whose money was stolen had an opportunity to speak about how the theft affected their businesses and families. Most expressed gratitude for the complete restitution we'd provided, and several even indicated they wanted to continue working with Henderson Properties under new management. David Wright, whose construction company lost $60,000 due to my father's theft, stood to address the group. What Mac accomplished here goes beyond making financial restitution. He demonstrated that business ethics aren't just abstract principles. They're practical foundations for building trust that creates long-term success. Agent Morrison, attending as a representative of federal law enforcement, confirmed that the Henderson family's cooperation with the FBI investigation led to arrests of identity thieves, money launderers, and corrupt officials in multiple agencies. This family's willingness to accept responsibility and work toward restitution turned a criminal case into a public service that will protect other families from similar crimes. The evening concluded with signatures on legal documents that formalized the new structure of Henderson Properties. I maintained controlling ownership with authority to make all major decisions. My father served as a senior sales associate with clearly defined limitations on his access to client funds. My mother handled administrative tasks under strict supervision. Jessica worked part-time while completing her business degree, learning the industry from entry-level positions rather than assuming unearned authority. Brandon's path had been different, but equally transformative. He completed electrician training through a program I funded, earned proper licensing and insurance, and established Bradley Electrical Services as a legitimate contracting business. His first major contract came through Henderson Properties, renovating our office building with completely honest billing and professional work quality. The most unexpected development came 3 months after the family meeting. Sarah, my girlfriend, who had been kept away from my graduation dinner through Jessica's lies, proposed a partnership that went beyond our romantic relationship. She'd completed her MBA in marketing and wanted to help Henderson Properties expand into new markets while maintaining our commitment to ethical practices. I watched you handle the worst crisis imaginable with integrity and compassion, Sarah told me as we walked through the rebuilt offices. I want to be part of what you're building, both professionally and personally. Working together, we developed a 5-year plan for Henderson Properties that included expansion into sustainable development projects, partnerships with minority-owned businesses, and a scholarship program for first-generation college students interested in real estate careers. The business my grandfather built, which my father nearly destroyed through criminal behavior, became a model for how family businesses can recover from ethical failures. The scholarship program held special significance for me. Using money recovered from my father's theft, we established the Henderson Integrity Foundation, which provided financial assistance to young people who demonstrated commitment to honest leadership despite difficult circumstances. The first recipient was Maria Gonzalez, a community college student whose family lost their home due to predatory lending practices we helped expose and prosecute. By the anniversary of my graduation dinner, Henderson Properties employed 37 people across 4 offices, maintained an impeccable reputation for honest dealing, and generated more revenue than the business ever achieved under my father's management. The success came from strict ethical standards, transparent financial practices, and a commitment to serving clients' interests rather than exploiting their trust. 1 year and 3 months after that devastating graduation dinner, I stood in the same Riverside Country Club banquet hall, but the scene couldn't have been more different. This time, the room buzzed with genuine celebration as Henderson Properties received the Illinois Business Ethics Council's Award for Outstanding Corporate Transformation. The crystal glasses reflected not just light from the chandeliers, but the faces of people who'd watched our family choose redemption over revenge, integrity over expedience. Sarah moved gracefully between our guests, her engagement ring catching the light as she discussed our upcoming expansion into sustainable housing development. We'd announced our engagement 3 months ago, and our relationship had become a model of the honest communication that now defined all aspects of my life. No secrets, no manipulation, no financial deception hiding behind claims of family loyalty. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the audience of business leaders, family members, and clients who now trusted Henderson Properties with their most important investments. 13 months ago, I stood in this exact room alone and betrayed by people I loved most. Tonight, I stand here with genuine family and real friends who've earned their place in my life through honesty and mutual respect. My father, Robert, sat at a table near the back, wearing the same expression of quiet pride he used to fake when introducing me as his successor. But tonight, The pride was genuine, earned through a year of honest work, rebuilding trust, one client interaction at a time. He'd become an excellent sales associate precisely because he could never again take shortcuts or manipulate situations to hide his failures. The real transformation began when I realized that betrayal, while painful, reveals everyone's true character. I continued, including your own. I could have chosen revenge, legal prosecution, or simply walked away from people who hurt me. Instead, I chose to demand better from them while still loving them through their failures. Jessica stood near the front of the room, holding the business degree she'd earned through evening classes while working full-time to repay her debt. She'd been promoted to Client Relations Coordinator, a position she earned through demonstrated competence rather than family connections. Her biggest achievement wasn't the degree or promotion, but the quiet confidence that came from knowing she was building something real rather than living off other people's work. Brandon couldn't attend tonight because he was completing an electrical installation for a new client, but he sent a video message that played on screens throughout the banquet hall. Mac taught me that real entrepreneurship means creating value for other people, not finding creative ways to take their money. His message began. Bradley Electrical Services exists because Mac invested in my potential rather than just punishing my past mistakes. Patricia, my mother, worked quietly in the background, ensuring that every detail of tonight's event ran smoothly. Her transformation from co-conspirator to trusted team member required the most time because rebuilding trust after betrayal is harder than building it initially. But she'd proven her commitment through consistent honest behavior, and her administrative skills had become essential to our expanded operations. Agent Morrison attended as our guest, representing the FBI's recognition of Henderson Properties' cooperation in multiple ongoing investigations. The Henderson family's response to crisis provides a model for how businesses can recover from ethical failures, she told our audience. Their willingness to accept responsibility, make complete restitution, and implement transparent practices helped law enforcement protect other families from similar crimes. The evening's highlight came when William Hartwell, our family attorney, read a previously sealed letter from my grandfather, written years before his death. The letter predicted that Robert would fail as a business leader and expressed confidence that I would have the character necessary to rebuild the family's reputation. If you're reading this, Mac, my grandfather's letter stated, it means you've discovered your father's weaknesses and chosen to address them constructively rather than simply walking away. Real leadership isn't about avoiding failure. It's about having the courage to clean up messes you didn't make while building something better for the people who depend on you. The letter included information about additional resources my grandfather set aside for exactly this situation, including contacts with ethical business leaders who'd faced similar challenges and recovered through a commitment to honest practices. These mentors had been invaluable in helping Henderson Properties establish credibility in markets where our reputation was damaged by my father's crimes. As the evening wound down, I stepped onto the country club's terrace overlooking Lake Michigan. The same view that had seemed so bleak 13 months ago now represented possibility and hope. Sarah joined me, and we watched the lights of Chicago reflect on the water while discussing plans for our wedding next spring and the opening of our Detroit office next fall. Do you ever regret not just walking away from all of them? Sarah asked, referring to my family and the massive effort required to rebuild our relationships. Never, I answered honestly. Walking away would have been easier in the short term, but it would have meant abandoning people I loved to face consequences they couldn't handle alone. More importantly, it would have meant giving up on the possibility that they could become better people. I thought about the young man who stood in this same spot over a year ago, humiliated and angry, holding a phone that revealed his family's betrayal. That person had every right to seek revenge, to let criminal charges destroy his family's lives, to build his own success, while letting them face the consequences of their choices alone. But revenge would have made me smaller, not stronger. Legal prosecution would have satisfied my anger without addressing the underlying problems that led to their criminal behavior. Walking away would have protected me while abandoning the possibility that love, combined with accountability, could transform destructive relationships into healthy ones. The hardest lesson was realizing that enabling someone's worst impulses isn't love, I told Sarah. Real love means caring enough about someone to refuse to participate in their self-destruction, even when that refusal causes temporary pain. Henderson Properties now serves as a case study in business schools, demonstrating how family enterprises can recover from ethical failures through transparent leadership and a commitment to stakeholder interests rather than just family benefit. We've been invited to speak at conferences about crisis management, family business governance, and the practical application of business ethics in competitive markets. But the professional recognition means less than the personal transformation I see in my family members. Jessica recently helped a client avoid a predatory real estate scheme using knowledge she gained from witnessing our family's own criminal behavior. Brandon's electrical business has expanded to employ 6 people, and he's become a mentor for other young entrepreneurs who want to build legitimate companies rather than seeking quick profits through questionable methods. My parents attend marriage counseling to address the communication patterns that enabled their criminal conspiracy. They've learned to have honest conversations about financial pressures, business challenges, and family responsibilities instead of creating elaborate deceptions to avoid temporary discomfort. The most meaningful change is that our family dinners now include real conversations instead of manipulation disguised as affection. We discuss actual problems and celebrate genuine achievements. We disagree openly rather than pretending agreement while secretly undermining each other. We've become a real family instead of just people related by genetics and financial dependence. As Sarah and I return to the banquet hall for final conversations with our guests, I'm reminded that this story began with betrayal but ends with redemption. Not the Hollywood version where everyone is perfectly healed and all problems disappear, but the real-world version where people do hard work to become better versions of themselves. The young man who whispered, "Good," in an empty banquet hall over a year ago thought he was preparing for revenge. Actually, he was preparing for the most challenging and rewarding experience of his life. Learning that love, combined with accountability, can transform broken relationships into something stronger than they were before the damage occurred. Tonight, as I look around this room filled with people who've earned their place through honest effort and mutual respect, I understand that my family's betrayal was actually a gift. It forced me to choose between becoming bitter or becoming better. It revealed character I didn't know I possessed. It gave me the opportunity to build a life based on integrity rather than just inheritance. The country club's grandfather clock chimes 11:30, marking the end of an evening that celebrates not just business success, but the triumph of choosing hope over hatred when faced with the worst possible betrayal from the people we love most. Have you ever faced a moment when someone you trusted completely betrayed that trust in a way that changed everything you believed about your relationship? How did you choose to respond? And what did that choice teach you about your own character? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to let me know. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming life's biggest challenges, and share this with someone who might need to hear that betrayal doesn't have to define your future. Thank you for listening to this journey from humiliation to redemption. And remember that the greatest victories often come from choosing to build something better rather than just tearing down what hurt you. Until next time, keep choosing integrity over expedience, and never underestimate the power of love combined with accountability to transform even the most broken relationships.